can you hear me okay? And can you see the screen? And is everything showing up right now for you? So pop in there. All right, Amanda, M. Top, welcome. Simone, Aaron, Jill, Amanda, Susan, Ruth, Janelle, awesome. Everyone can hear, everybody can see. Let's go ahead and get started. So everybody, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Scott Ozer, who I've had the pleasure of meeting and talking to. So Scott, thanks a lot for spending the time with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kyle. Thank you guys all for attending and for joining us on this webinar today. I really liked Kyle's introduction. I think that keeping this sort of light on intensity, but also very, very heavy on information and on action items. I just kind of real brief background on myself. I actually have over 20 years of association experience, 10 on the association side. I was an association exec for about 10 years. So, you know, I sat in most of your seats for quite some time before I went out on my own. And now I'm lucky enough to be a consultant and work on membership and other things within the association space. So I totally understand, and I'm hoping I'm bringing to you a lot of value, because that's what I was and I'm still looking for whenever I hear a webinar or attend a conference or anything else. I want to hear lots of value and lots of information. So,
Scott, I could just throw one thing in there for everyone that's new. Anyone that we bring into these webinars with us, we vet as well. So not only did Charlotte, our head of marketing, have a conversation with Scott and find him, Scott and I talked last week and just ran through, and we want to make sure that they understand the nuances that exist when you are a chapter relations professional or you have an association with chapters or components. When I talked to Scott, it was like one of those moments where I had the epiphany of like, yes, this guy gets it. He understands that you can't just market to membership when there's components. There's all these nuances that exist. And Scott, you and I talked about, you go to a lot of these events, and we love ASAE, but you go to, their marketing and membership and communications conference, and you come up with a great idea on how to do email marketing, yet you don't have access to all the emails because they're at your chapters, right? So those are the things that when I talked to Scott, I was like, this guy is awesome when it comes to growing membership. So just for everyone who knows, we make sure we vet it, and we're really excited to share with you what Scott's got going on.
Yeah, Kyle and Charlotte kind of beat me up a little bit. So if I'm a little bit tired or it sounds like I'm a little bit bruised this morning, it's because that vetting process was, a little bit painful. But fortunately, I did survive, and I'm here, and obviously I'm just joking about that. But I do think that this topic is great. I mean, as a consultant, there are some projects that I do, I will be very honest with you, that are a little bit more painful than others. But I think that this one that we're going to talk about today was awesome. The people I worked with were fantastic. The purpose of the effort was fantastic. So all in all, I think this was just something great, and I'm hoping that you guys will get a lot out of it. So, Kyle, unless you got anything else, I'm just going to kind of jump in.
Yeah, rock and roll. Everybody, I'm sitting here in the chat for you, so if you got any questions, I'll be there for you.
All right, cool. So now all I got to do is get this to do something. All right, there we go. Who we are and what we do. I think we already did that, didn't we? So we've passed that. Nice smiling faces. So Kyle and I are actually up and awake this morning or this afternoon, depending on where you are, and we're ready to rock and roll. So real quick, and you guys can sort of answer these over in the chat box. I'm just trying to get an idea and get some things to sort of think about before we really start and launch right into the case study. And so, at your own organization, at your own association, I'm going to ask you 3 questions. 1, have you attempted any membership collaboration with your components? If you're coming from the national perspective, have you currently attempted any membership collaboration with your components? Whether that, I'm going to focus primarily on recruitment in my case study, but for recruitment or retention, have you attempted any membership collaboration with your components? I'll give you a couple of minutes to answer.
Yep, so Susan said yes, Amanda said yes. And when you're talking about membership collaboration, recruitment, retention, are you thinking of like best practices, Scott, or maybe like certain programs they rolled out or technology?
I was actually talking more along the lines of actual programs, actual campaigns, actual efforts, all of those kind of things. So that really doing something special, and not, doing something unique, doing something targeted, doing an actual program that that involves active collaboration with your components.
Great. So we got a bunch of associations that just came in, and across the board, the answer is yes, Scott. Everyone said yes.
All right, fantastic. That's great. Hopefully, then what we'll talk about today will sort of help enhance what you guys are doing and give you some other ideas. It's great that you are already doing things. I think that I have seen in my experience, a lot of associations struggle with that. It's how do you get the national and the components to play nicely together? How do you get them to enhance their relationships? How do you get them, to utilize each other's strengths to the best of to their advantage? All those kind of things. So it's great that you guys are already working on that. All right, question 2. Have you currently dedicated resources to it? Have you dedicated financial, technical, or human, or all of the above resources to those efforts?
So we got Jill that said yes, Amanda that said yes, Brian said nope, Alan yes, Christy yes, Ruth said yes, time and labor, Alan said yes-ish. So you got a bunch of yeses.
I like the yes-ish. That's yeah. I think that's what a lot of organizations do. It's like yes, but probably not as optimally as we could have. So yes-ish is not is not a bad answer. The reason that I put this question out there is because, as you'll see through this case study that I present, if you're going to work closely and have a good relationship with your components and vice versa, there need to be resources dedicated to it. It's not just something that kind of just happens. There is truly a relationship building aspect of components and working with the staff, whether it be paid or volunteer. So it's very, very important that we're going to, at your association, that you're dedicating resources to it. It doesn't have to be a full-time person or a full-time team, but there is going to have to be a dedicated effort and dedicated resources. So finally, this is going to be sort of silly because most of you have already said yes, but I don't have a crystal ball to know how many people are saying yes. But we'll just close this out real quickly with, are you planning to do more or try more collaboration with your components in the future?
And I would add to that, maybe one reason that you struggle with it, if you're struggling with it. I like that. So plan to try it in the future, and if anyone's got any ideas on what you're struggling with, let us know that too.
Yeah, you could even, we could even tweak that question a little bit. Are planning to try it or improve it or do more with it in the future? You can try and do all of those things. So any roadblocks you're seeing, and then, Kyle and I can follow up with some of those questions afterwards and try and help you with some advice or some tips and tricks and things.
Yep, you got a lot of yeses, Scott. And then Jill said, hey, Jill, what's going on? Jill said, yes, it's ongoing if you have chapters or affiliates. We tie it into our strategic plan and overall mission. Christy said, awesome. Yes, if our chapters grow, we grow. So you got a bunch of yeses.
All right, awesome. So it sounds like, just from what we're hearing, and I understand not everybody replied, which is totally cool. It sounds like you guys are already doing quite a bit with your components and with your chapters, and that's great. So what I'm hoping to do today, my goal is really to give you a case study, to present to you a case study of a group that I think was unique in what they did, was unique in how they went about it. It truly is a campaign. This is where I'll explain it to you in more detail, but this was truly a one-off campaign. It lasted for quite a while, but this was not an ongoing thing. They were doing other ongoing efforts as well, but what we're going to talk about today is truly one campaign. So let's just jump right into this, and here we go. Case study. The name of the association at my client was the Hearth, Patio, and Barbecue Association. As we've all talked about, there is an association for everything, and this group really, what they represented was Hearth, meaning, it could be inside fireplaces, it could be outside fireplaces, it could be almost anything that you would put on your patio, from furniture to the tile that was on that made up the patio, and then any sort of barbecue item. So it was focused on that area, but it was also kind of broad. And what was really, really unique about this association is that they tried to, and in many ways did, cover the entire food chain. So besides the consumer. So what they did was they covered they had manufacturer members. they had distributor members, they had manufacturer rep members, they had retailer members. So they really wanted to get everything. They wanted to have a presence and have members from as many of those categories as they can, because they wanted to cover the entire process from production, manufacturing, all the way to getting it into the retail stores, getting it into the consumers. Because what their ultimate goal was to serve their members, but they wanted to be able to reach the consumers so that they could provide as many of these products to the consumers as possible, so that then their members would actually benefit and so their members would be successful. So they did very, very well with the manufacturers. They did very, very well with the distributors. They did very, very well when it came to membership with the manufacturers reps. The reason I started working with them is they had one challenge, which was that they were having they were lacking in retailer members. They were having a really, really, really hard time reaching the retailers. Part of that was because of the different mix of retailers. There were some mom and pop shops. There was some big, large firms. They were all over the place. And so what we did was I worked with them in a consulting on a consulting engagement to develop a multi-channel recruitment campaign. And as you can see from this statement right here, they had limited resources on the national side especially. On the national side, it was basically a membership director who was sort of like the VP of the association who did the membership, and then he had like a membership manager, and that was all they had on the membership side. And then they had also, they needed to get the components involved. And so they were really trying to do that as well, and they were really they wanted to do that in order to maximize their reach, in order to maximize their resources, because they had them in lots of different areas. So what their goal was, as I mentioned, was that they wanted to increase membership at both national and components in that tough-to-reach membership category, which was the retailers. All right, so that was what I was brought in to do. I was brought in to help them develop the strategy and also to do the implementation of this campaign. The campaign hadn't been figured out yet. They didn't know what to do yet. So we worked together to do that, and sort of here were the, as we jumped into this, as we jumped into the project, here were some of the challenges that we faced in the retail market in particular. First of all, I'll give you a real quick background, or a little bit more background on the relationship between national and affiliates. There were actually 13 regional affiliates. The affiliates all were different sizes. They were all of different staff size. Some were all volunteers. Some had paid staff. Some had lots of money. Some had no money. And I'm sure that situation or that scenario is not unique, because that tends to be the case with affiliates, components in associations. It's just the way that it works. Some have money, some don't, and you never know, and therefore what they're able to do and what they're able to deliver varies across the different affiliates. So when they were trying to figure out how to get to these retailers, one of their challenges was that the national organization, HPBA, did not have really strong connections and contacts within the retailer audience. That information was held by the affiliates, and that information was actually held in many times by the manufacturers reps and the distributors, because those were the guys who knew what retailers were staying open, what retailers were closing, what retailers were strong, where they were, all of those kind of things, because they were the ones that were reaching out to them directly. The manufacturers reps and the distributors made their money. They got their success out of visiting these retailers and reaching these retailers. So one of the things we had to figure out was how national could work with the components, work with affiliates to get that information. Secondly, national and component relationship was a challenge. It wasn't as cohesive as it might have been. As I mentioned just a couple of minutes ago, there were some small affiliates, there were some large affiliates, there were some medium-sized affiliates, there were some that basically just covered a state, some that covered multiple states. And so when you have such a wide variety of relationships with your components and such a wide variety of staffing structures and geographic structures, it makes it a little bit difficult. The good part was that one of the things that they had developed was they had an affiliate council where all of these guys, all of the affiliates would have a representative or two on this membership committee that they worked on. And so they did have an open line of communication, but again, you had so many different variables in there that you couldn't treat every component, every affiliate the same. And then finally, they had limited resources. I know I mentioned this, and so it's sort of redundant, but I wanted to get all three of these out in one place. They didn't have a lot of they didn't have a lot of time in national. They didn't have a lot of resources, and they also did not, especially the affiliates, did not have a lot of money. Some had more than others, but they really did not have a ton of cash that they could throw at this issue, and so they needed national's assistance in order to make this happen. And I think that really is the key. Ultimately, what you're going to see at the end of this and what you're going to hear is that this truly was a collaboration. National could not have done this on their own. The affiliates could not have done it on their own. They really, really, really needed each other. And how did we figure out how to make this work? That's what we're going to talk about right now. Kyle, do you want me to wait a second and see if there's questions?
I think we're doing pretty good. I don't see anything in the chat, but if they come up, I'll interject.
All right, cool. Yeah, I'll stop just from time to time. So in order to implement, this is sort of what we did, right? So I'm going to walk right into the implementation on how they planned. What did we do in advance to figure out what the strategy was going to be, what the tactical process was going to be, literally what was this thing going to be? Because as I mentioned, we had a goal. We knew exactly what the goal was, but we didn't know exactly how we were going to get there. So what we did was, step one, we enlisted the help of that membership committee. That, as I mentioned, their membership committee at HPBA was a representative or two representatives from every affiliate. These guys had committed. They had basically stepped up and said, we're going to do this. So in advance of doing this, because we knew we were going to need their help, we had to make sure that we had the buy-in from the membership committee. We had to make sure that they were okay. We had to make sure that they were on board. We were make sure that they were willing to help, and we were willing to make sure that they were willing and able to share information. So what we've done with these slides, which I think will be very helpful to you, is on almost every slide where there's a step or there's an action item, what we have done is put what the nationals role is, and then what it's affiliates, but we titled them components so that it would be sort of more generic to what everybody else might have, whether it's special interest groups, components, chapters, affiliates, it doesn't really matter what it's called, but we just titled them components. So in this case, the nationals role was to manage responsibilities, roles, and expectations. We were the ones, from the national perspective, we were the ones who were developing this strategy, and so therefore we had to make sure that all of the affiliates and all of the affiliate reps, staff, knew what was going on, knew what was expected of them, knew what they were supposed to be doing. The component really, when we enlisted the help of the membership committee, they really had no role at that point. Their role was basically to say, all right, that's fantastic, we're in. You know, you've got our buy-in, we're totally good to go, but they didn't really have anything that they needed to actively pursue at that time. They just needed to commit, and then we could continue to move forward.
Hey, Scott.
So yeah, go ahead.
So on that step two, because there's some people that touched in the chat earlier, when it's a bottom up, and I love what Christy said earlier, when you're collecting dues at the chapter level or affiliate level coming up, you need, it's a very common thread, membership grows when they grow membership. But can you kind of talk through, even when there's a top-down function, or maybe even in the bottom-up structure, it's tough to maybe get the membership team or marketing team on board at HQ to focus on this. So when you're creating this committee and communicating it throughout the headquarters staff, how would you advise, or what could people do if they're struggling with that, to get everybody on board with this project?
Yeah, I think in this situation, we were very fortunate and very lucky because it was a bottom-up structure. It's sort of a mix, actually, at HPBA because the manufacturers actually joined HPA directly. But this group that we were going after, the retailers, they would join their local group. They would join their affiliates. And so in order to get the buy-in from the affiliates, we basically told them this, that, number one, this is going to be beneficial to you. This is going to drive membership to your affiliate, and we are going to provide many of the resources that you are going to need to get this done. We are going to make this as painless for you as possible, but ultimately, the effort that is going to drive membership in your affiliate, and that's what they wanted. They wanted to really hear that this is not
their commitment to it. I like that.
Yeah, exactly. So as we go through, Kyle and everyone else, you guys will see sort of how we did this, and you will see that National ended up doing a lot of work to benefit the affiliates.
Great. Scott, one quick more question came from Christy was the membership committee made up of volunteers or chapter staff?
That is a yes and yes question, because some of the affiliates only had volunteers. It was a volunteer staff, and then others had paid staff. So they were staff at the affiliates, but sometimes they were not getting paid and sometimes they were.
Awesome.
Right. We clear on the queue?
Yep, ready to roll.
All right, great. All right, so step 2. This is a critical piece, whether you're doing something just national or just affiliates or just or combined. We reviewed the internal resources, and what we did was we did it in 2 steps. I talked and more or less interviewed the key people on staff at national, and then the key people on staff, again, whether it volunteer or paid staff at the affiliates. Because what we needed to do was we needed to figure out what people could do, what they were able to do, what they had the capacity to do. Because if we were, and I deal with this as a consultant all the time, and I say to clients all the time, you know what, I need to know what you guys are capable of. I may put some tactics in there and some strategies in there that'll push your limits a little bit, but and this goes for technical resources, this goes for human resources, this goes for financial resources. It's all 3 of them. If I were to, give a client, or in this case, if we were to put together a strategy that said, okay, you're going to need 20 people and $10 million and some super fancy software to do this, and throw that, and toss that plan their way, and it turns out they've got 2 people and $10 and a laptop, then this doesn't help anybody, right? And my goal is, and I think that working from, regardless of which side you're on, the national or the affiliate perspective, the goal should always be to make something that is definitely a little bit aggressive, but not overly aggressive, so that you can know that what the process and the procedures and the strategy that you're putting into place is actually doable. It doesn't help anybody to put something out there or to say, hey, this is what we're going to implement, and it also impacts your credibility as the leader of the process if you're sending them something or suggesting something that they know right away just does not fit. Any sort of cookie cutter approach is not going to work. So what I did was I actually interviewed, as I mentioned, I interviewed all the affiliate leaders to talk to them about what they were seeing in the industry, what type of resources they had available, and what they could do to help. And then I also talked to national to see sort of basically the same thing. What could they do to help? What sort of resources could they provide, and what could they do to make this thing as smooth as possible, and also to see what sort of unique perspectives they had on what was going on in the market. So I got a lot of information that way. Everybody was, of course I had the typical cancellations of phone calls and things, but it really did not take too long to get those things together. And the information that came out of it was fantastic, because ultimately at the end of the day, I knew exactly what was viable and what was not. So it wasn't just a shot in the dark using my expertise and maybe somebody's on staff expertise to put together a plan that nobody can implement. So what was the component role? Again, trying to make this as painless as possible. What they needed to do was participate in the conversation in a timely manner. I scheduled interviews with all of them. We had a very open conversation, as I mentioned, about their resources, about the different things that they could take on, about the information they had access to, all of those kind of things. So really all they needed to do at this point in time in step 2 was be on the phone and be present and be and be very mindful about how important this was. All right, Kyle, anything? I'll stop between steps, I guess.
Yeah, we just got a question on that. So for the step 2 for reviewing internal resources, as you're kind of going on that listening tour, if you're an association that has a lot of chapters that you can't talk to all of them, how would you? Jason asked, how would you choose the ones to interview, and how would you choose the ones to get involved with early?
I think that what I would recommend, depending on what your goal is and depending on what you're trying to accomplish, I would say that you need to sort of pick a mix, right? If you're going to do this and you've got lots and lots of chapters and lots of components, I would recommend that you do sort of a pilot program first. We were able, like I said, they had 13. So we were able to do this nationwide right off the bat. They didn't have 1,300. They didn't have 130,000. They had 13 affiliates. So it was very easy to do. But what I have worked with groups on in the past is, instead of just doing everybody, pick a pilot and then make your whoever is part of the pilot program choose those chapters based on whatever those characteristics might be that would allow you to get a good, even, fair sample that would represent the different types of affiliates you have. Whether it's, do you need a really small one that's volunteer run, or 5% of them should be that, and then some of them should be big ones or large ones that have paid staff, and then some should be in the middle. Some, the other ideas that you could use, some could be in rural areas and some could be in urban areas. There's a number of different ways to break it up, but I think that what you would want to do is pick a number that is manageable, but then make sure that whatever that pilot program consists of, that it's representative of your overall chapter structure. Because then, as you do that, it makes it easier to roll it out, because you'll have an idea of how all of these different sizes, geographic locations, structures will react to everything that you do.
Awesome. Q is clear.
All right. Complete research, step 3. Basically what we did was, based off of all the information that we received from the affiliates and from the national interviews, I really compiled all of the assets and analyzed their value. Part of what we did in that research phase, and I don't want to skip over this because this is very, very important, and I mentioned it before, we knew going into this that the affiliates were the ones who had the information and the data on the retailers. National did not. So part of compiling the list of assets and analyzing the value was we talked to them about how we would go about generating these lists, the prospect lists, how we would find them, how would we gather all the information together, who would we be talking to at their affiliate to get it, and then also one of the things that we wanted to know was what human assets they had. Because as you'll see later, we went through this multi-touch, multimedia approach. So because the retailers we wanted to have some face-to-face interaction as well, and the affiliates had told us that the manufacturers reps and the distributors often have that face-to-face interaction. We needed to know what that availability was too. So when assets meant human assets, it meant data assets, it meant financial assets, and then we really put that all together into a pot and looked at everything as a whole to see what our best tactics were going to be. So what the component role was at this point, really they didn't have any role. This was all on national, and you'll see that, again, I'm going to reiterate this multiple times. We tried to make this as painless as we could on the affiliates. We wanted them to benefit without having to put in a ton of effort and a ton of work. So there are going to be a number of these where it says the component role is not applicable, because this was all of the strategy was on our end. All right, anything else? Anything on that one, Kyle?
I think we're good.
All right, step 4. This was the fun part and the kind of scary part and the exciting part. So develop the strategy and implement the plan. What we did on the national side was we basically put together the strategy, what we were going to try and do, why we were going to try and do it, and then I think the really key, which is not even listed here, is how. How were we going to get this outreach done? What was the tactical plan that we were going to undertake? And so we put this together all on the national side. I led the charge on that and did most of this creation. And the only reason I mention that is not to toot my own horn, but just to say that you need a leader. You know, when you're going to do a project like this, there needs to be a leader. It needs to be collaborative, but there also needs to be a leader who's going to kind of take the reins and really run with the ball. Wow, that was really bad. Take the reins and run with the ball. I don't know what is going on through my head today. So I apologize for those. But anyways, yeah, somebody's got to take the lead. Somebody's got to be in charge, and somebody's got to be on top of the strategy development and the tactical plan. And so that's what we did on the national side. And then from there, all that they had to do, because again, this was based off of their input. This was based off of what they told us about the assets that they had available to them. All they had to do was review the plan and say, yes, we can do this. No, we can't do that. Yes, we can do this piece. No, we can't really do this piece. And it was sometimes different depending on which affiliate we were talking to. Again, some of them were large, some of them were small. Some of them had only volunteers. Some of them had full-time paid staff. So, you know, we asked everybody. You know, again, we had 13, so it wasn't hard. Back to the question, if you wanted to develop a pilot, you would want to develop in a size where you could talk to everybody because, as you will see, they played a very critical role in this. We could not have done what we did without the help of the affiliates. So that's what we did for the strategy and implementation plan. Again, this was the strategy and implementation plan was all based upon the knowledge that we received through the interviews and analyzing the assets that we received from them. All right, Kyle, anything else?
So this has all been in prep to kind of, you know, figure out what the plan's going to be to implement something or the strategy to grow membership through the slides. And I know we're going to talk about implementation next. How long did that prep take? Like, how long did this process take to listen to the components, which is such a huge aspect of it? You can't roll out a membership plan telling them what to do without talking to them and getting their input. But how long did that whole process take for you guys in this one case study?
It actually only took about 3 weeks. We were able to, amazingly enough, nail down all of the interviews within a couple of weeks, and then it took about a week to put everything together.
Awesome. Cool. That was it.
Okay, great. All right, step 5. And this is another really key piece of this. It was really, you know, what are the roles? We needed to determine and present roles and responsibilities, and we needed to review and commit to agreed upon roles and responsibilities. This got down to the real nitty-gritty. It was, what is everybody going to do? How is it going to get done? When is it going to get done? And so this was like the right before you start developing everything, right before you're ready to truly commit and launch this program, this was that review phase. And so this happened the very last thing we did because, again, we wanted these guys to be part of the team. We wanted the affiliate leaders to be part of the team, and we wanted to make sure that, all right, you guys, this is awesome. It's going to be fantastic. Here's what we're doing. This is what you're committing to. Everybody good? So let's launch. And so, and the launch at that point was really just the launch of the actual development. And so that was the final step before we went into the implementation plan. Kyle, I know that was a short one. Any questions brought up by that?
Nope, I think we're good.
Fantastic. All right. So once we got everybody's buy-in, once we knew what the plan was, once we knew what everybody had to offer, once we knew what could be done by all the different affiliates, what national had to do versus what the affiliates had to do, what type of information we needed, what sort of commitment we needed, then we went to the implementation plan. So step 1 of the implementation plan was we had to develop the direct mail list and materials. I'm going to give you guys, you'll see this as we go through, but real quick, as we put together that plan, we ended up with sort of a 3-prong approach. 1, National was actually going to do a direct mail campaign to the retailers that we received contact information from the manufacturers' reps and the manufacturers and the distributors that were all the members of the affiliates. So the affiliates, actually, they were the ones that got the lists together. They contacted their members. They got those lists together. They sent them to National. All right. So what we needed to do from a national perspective was we needed to actually develop the materials. We needed to develop the wording. We needed to develop the messaging. We needed to do everything that needed to be done to get that direct mail campaign out. And then what the components needed to do, and you'll see as we get down into this a little bit more, we actually also, we targeted the brochures, we targeted the letters, and we tweaked them so that they looked like, our goal was that we wanted the retailers, because we were asking them to join their affiliate, HPBA New England or HPBA California, whatever it might be. We were actually asking them to join that. We wanted that logo. We wanted that messaging on there. So the components obviously needed to give us that information. They needed to give us print-ready graphics. They provided some input into the content, because I'll show you in the letter that we sent out, we tweaked the content of the letter a little bit so it was applicable for those different affiliates and the different things that they had going on within their segment of the industry. And then they also provided us the mailing list. So this was, again, we helped them do what they needed to do in two ways. One, we provided all of the design, we provided all the copywriting, we paid for the mailing, we paid for the printing, we paid for all that stuff. So what the components needed to do was just get us the logos, provide input, and get us the mailing list. So yeah, some could say that's a kind of a pain in the butt, but it didn't cost them anything, right? They needed to do nothing. There was no fee required on their end. So that was very, very good. And again, I'm going to show you later what some of these pieces look like so you can see some of these tweaks and the unique segmenting that we did so that it would really, really resonate with the audiences. Kyle, anything?
Yeah, the questions, I see one, but I know a lot of people are thinking in their head right now, how do you get the, especially volunteer ran components, how do you get them to actually complete that task? And is that something that you experienced was a challenge here?
In a couple of situations it was, but in general it was not. And I think that, I don't want to say that everything was roses on this end, because it wasn't. But because everybody had committed to be on that membership committee and we walked them through all the steps in the membership committee, there was a lot of peer pressure involved. So if anybody had not done their piece or had not really stepped up to the plate, everybody would have known. And so I think that put a lot of pressure on folks to really do what they can do. I don't think that we got the maximum effort that we could have from every affiliate, but overall they all gave us something. And at the end of the day, and I know I mentioned this earlier, at the end of the day, they benefit by doing this, right? If they're not going to provide us with lists, then we can't help them grow their membership, and they all wanted to grow their membership. Sometimes what we would have to do is if, let's say it was a volunteer staff of 2, and the man or woman who was running it said, look, I don't really have time to do this right now, and we need to get lists from somebody. All right, well, who can we go to get the list? Just give us a name, and then we'll do that work. So we did as much of the legwork as we possibly could. And again, I'll say this a million times while we're talking in this hour, but I wanted this to be as painless for them as possible. So if we needed to do a little bit extra on the national side to get the information, we were going to go get it. And so we did.
Great. And then for everyone asking, he's got the templates coming up near the end of the webinar, so you'll take a look at those materials.
Yeah, sorry about that. We wanted to walk through everything, and then you'll see the voila at the end where you see everything come out. All right, so step 2, we developed the targeted brochures. As I was talking about, and you'll see this, we tweaked brochures because we wanted it to be applicable to everyone. The main thing on the brochures, which didn't have a big tweak, was that there actually is a Canada chapter, Olive chapter, a Canada affiliate. And they don't have access to the insurance program because it's Canada, and the insurance program is only eligible to U.S. based. And so the main thing, and you'll see this, the main change that we had to make was we used the HPBA C, the Canada logo, and we took out the insurance program. But basically everything else is the same. So we developed those marketing pieces. The components, again, they reviewed, approved, and signed off. Easy enough to do. We sent it to everybody. They reviewed them. They approved them. They signed off on them. Piece of cake. So we wanted to make that easy. And you'll see that everything was consistent with the brand. Everything was consistent with their look and feel. Everything was consistent with their messaging. And it wasn't hard to do the targeted brochures because basically it was a plate change. It wasn't like we needed to redesign everything. We just made a plate change, so it didn't cost very much to develop the 2 different versions of the brochure. Step 3. Organize communications around the National Call Day. One of the things that sort of came out of the blue for this, as we were talking on a membership committee call one day, was, hey, why don't we do a national call day? I would love to take credit for this brilliant idea, but it was not mine. One of the volunteers said, why don't we just do this? And so we actually did. We had all of the affiliates. We had national. We had a bunch of the staff at national all in a room, all on the same day. And they were calling the retailers to see if they wanted to join, to see if they were interested in more membership information, to see if they had any questions, all those kind of things. So we made it very rah-rah, and we tried to get everybody really, really excited about the call day. And from what I understand, obviously I couldn't have been at all the affiliates, but so it went very, very well. So national role, we organized national staff, and we worked with the components as needed. They did most of the promotion on their own. They did most of the organization on their own. So that was fantastic. And then the components role was they scheduled and organized their own day. Everybody kind of did their own time. We didn't make it so it would be a single day because it was just too hard. We had a number of them do it on the same day, but just trying to get everybody and the volunteers organized all on the same day was very, very difficult. So some did it on one day and other days, and then most of them, including national, did it all on the same day. And we did, for the call day, we did provide scripts and those kind of things. That all came from national so that we would have at least similar messaging across the board. So that was it. And I see a question that's popping up. What was the timing on calls after the brochures were mailed? We did it about 3 weeks after the brochures were mailed. And one thing I'm going to show you guys in a minute, and one thing I'm going to mention to you is that the manufacturer's reps had a big role in this too. And I'm going to explain that a little bit more when we get into what the brochures actually looked like. So again, this was a multi-pronged approach. It wasn't just the mailing and then the calls. We actually had face-to-face delivery that the manufacturer's reps did and that the distributors did, because they were the ones who were walking into these people's stores and talking to them about their own products. And so we actually sent to the affiliates a big stack. They gave us input into about how many they would want. We gave them a big stack of the brochures, and then as they saw the manufacturer's reps, they would give them to the manufacturer's reps, and the manufacturer's reps would literally just walk them into the offices or into the stores and mention it to the owners and say, hey, this is something you guys should consider. It's got a lot of value. I think you'd enjoy it, whatever the pitch was. But so that was another piece. So, you know, what was the timing after calls? It was the timing after the brochures were mailing, after the direct mail campaign. It was about 2 weeks after in most cases, but we were also doing other things all at that same time with the face-to-face drops. All right, so step 4, recruit volunteers, make calls, distribute materials, and send results for tracking. This was the kind of the whole thing all together, right? As I mentioned, we really did 3 things. One, we did the direct mail, which came out of national, but you will see looked like it came from the affiliates. We had the national call days, which the affiliates pretty much organized on their own, but that national did as well. And then, as I just mentioned, what we did was we also did the manufacturers, reps, and the distributors. We printed a bunch of these things, and we did ask for input because we didn't want to print 1 million of them and then have the affiliates give out 20 of them, and we're just wasting national's money. That doesn't make any sense. So we did ask them for an estimate, and at times they would ask for more, and we would send more and do those kind of things. But so those were really the 3 main things that we did. But one of the keys, which I'm going to go into this a little bit more later, one of the key things that we wanted to try and do was to be able to track the results of this, to see how many members were generated, to see how many pieces were passed out. This is, again, one of the challenges that you can have with affiliates or with components, is that they're not always great about getting back to you. When you don't have one central database, which these guys obviously did not, it's hard to really track that information. We tried very, very hard to get that information back. What we heard back was not fantastic. We didn't get great response, but we got some, and overall they really, really thought it went very well, and they told us that they gained a lot of members, but we don't know exactly how many. So again, and I've been through this, and we're getting to about 10 minutes left in time, and I want you guys to be able to ask some questions if you have them. National role, we sent the direct mail, and we also sent those bulk materials to all the affiliates based on the quantity that they requested. And then the component role was they identified the manufacturer's reps, and they provided them with the marketing materials, and they also then organized and implemented their own call days. So that was that. Before I get into the actual brochures, any other questions, Kyle, that popped up?
So could you talk us through, as you guys were measuring, what did success look like for the program itself? If you're looking to grow membership this way through your components, how do you manage expectations on what it could produce?
That is a very interesting question and a hard one to answer, because in every market it was different, right? We had all these different affiliates, and there were different numbers of retailers there, and so we didn't really have an overall goal per affiliate, which actually, you bring up a really good point, is probably something that wouldn't have hurt us to do. It probably would have helped us to do that. I don't know, because of the size and the different skill level, whether it would be staff or paid staff or volunteer staff, how easy it would have been to do that. So we really just, bottom line is, at the end of the day, this is going to sound scary coming from a marketing person, but we wanted to just show that there was growth. We wanted to be able to come back after this and say, hey, you know what, we grew across all the affiliates. We increased our number of retailers. That was their number one goal, was to have more than they started out. There was also a branding component of this, where they wanted to increase the knowledge of HPBA across all the retailers, because many of them don't know. If you're a small shop, mom and pop shop, you're probably not going to know what HPBA could even do for you. So we really did that. I mean, I know that doesn't give you a very good answer, but that's what these guys did. I mean, I would think that you would want to, if I was the one who was going to do this, I would do a couple of things. One, I would try and figure out what the lifetime value could be. I would do that calculation in advance and say, all right, if we bring in a new retail member, the dues are going to be X, and then over a lifetime of their membership, we're going to get this much money out of them, or this much commitment or engagement, however you figure out your lifetime value. I think that's going to be very, very important. And then you can sort of turn that into either a budget, right? You're saying, all right, we know that it's going to bring in this much. We know we need to bring in this many members, and that's how you can set your goal. Or you can do it on the other end and say, all right, if we bring in this number of people, which we think is fair, and it's going to bring in $10,000, well, then we don't want to spend any more than $10,000 to generate those folks, so it wouldn't be your budget.
I just dropped a link into the chat too for an infographic that kind of explains and gives us more information on how you can create a formula, real simple, or you can get complex with the lifetime value. So check that out.
Yeah, thanks, Kyle. I would go with as simple as possible for lifetime value. I mean, if any of us play on the ASA Collaborate site, there's been questions about a million times, like, what do you really put into lifetime value? How do you calculate the true cost of a campaign? Do you include overhead? Do you include this? Do you include that? I realize that money and finance and budgeting and forecasting and everything is really, really, really important to associations, but sometimes it can be overthought as well. And when you're doing a campaign like this, I would say simple is a little bit better. I could understand if you were needing to pitch this to your superior or to justify it to the board or whatever it might be. Yes, you definitely need some dollar figures, but lifetime value can help you a ton in doing that. All right, so we got all that rolling, step 4, and then now here comes the fun part. And I've presented this a bunch of times, and oftentimes people can't see this, so I'm really happy that you guys can actually see this since we're all working on our own laptops. This is what I was mentioning before. This was the brochure that we sent out, and it was a two-sided, trifold, 4-color. They wanted it to be 4-color because they do have some very nice-looking products. Like, you can see the outside fire pit, and you can see the inside wood-burning stove and those kind of things. So they had some very attractive pieces. But the reason I wanted to show you this is that, as I mentioned, we could not do the same thing for Canada as we could for the United States. So all we did was, and it's a retailer membership, we made sure that that's the number one piece. We made sure that it was very, very clear that this was a retail membership offer. As a retailer, we wanted you to become a member. And so As you can see on the one on the left-hand side of the screen, that's the one that's going to Canada. And so you can, you've got the HPBA logo, you've got the HPBA Canada logo. So, that makes a ton of sense. We put a few of the benefits down the side and why you'd want to join. And then we did the same thing with the other ones. We did not capture, just for slide's sake, we did not capture the other side. But on the other side of this brochure, it's just, again, it's slightly different because we could not mention the insurance program. So in the one that's on the right-hand side, it does mention on the other side, it mentions the insurance program because that is a very valuable benefit, but it's not available to the Canadian members, so we did not offer it and did not even mention it on that side. So that's really those were the two big keys, and we use these for two purposes. One, this was mailed, and I'll show you the letter that it was mailed with, which is the really customized piece. And this is what was given to the manufacturers, reps, and the distributors to literally hand out to the different retailers that they visited face to face. All right, so here's the letter that was sent, and this was from the New England HPBA. And there's a lot of things to point out here. We really tried to. What we did was, you can see what you see on the left is a lot of this is template, right? So like we developed a skeleton for this. We wanted to make this as easy and as cost effective as possible. So we wanted to. We made this into a template more or less. So like the HPBA part was, the logo at the top, your special invitation to become a retail member, all of that was static. The deer, we would fill it in so it would be personalized. Northeast affiliate, any HPBA, that was actually a blank, so that could be filled in. And then some of these things that we got information from the affiliates for, like the Northeast affiliate, right? You got that. And then at times they would give us some other information, but basically this was almost all template, and then we could just fill that in. And when we ran it through the printer, well, the printer ran it through the printer on the printing press, they would fill in all these different things. So we had one version for every single affiliate, which allowed, you can even see up here, this came from Charles Page, the president of any HPBA, right? So it looks like it's coming from your local, because this is an organization where most of your dealings are going to be with your local or with your affiliate. We wanted them to contact them, and we didn't want it to come from national and just everybody looked the same. So we did 13 different versions of the letter. So here's what we did. Number one, we had a quote from Charlie, right? So he was the guy who said, hey man, I'm one of your colleagues. I'm very involved in this. You should join. Quotes always add, as it says right here, add social proof. It proves to you that other people like you are thinking the same way, are getting value out of it. We referenced the collaboration. It tied, right here. You've got the board of directors saying, hey, you guys should join this. Special invitation. It says directly right on here, it's the Northeast affiliate of the HPBA. So that we wanted to make sure that they knew that it was local, that they weren't just joining the national organization. Segmented and targeted by location. As I mentioned already, we don't have to go into it again, but we worked with them to see what they were able to do. We pointed out that the meetings were local. We again referenced that it's the Northeast affiliate, so it's close to them, which was very, very important. And then we incentivized them. We showed the value, right? HPBA members are entitled to a discount on certification courses. So, very briefly, what are some of the benefits? Why should I join? What am I going to get out of this? So, again, it was basically a 2-page letter with the response device at the end. Because of the cost of membership, it wasn't real expensive at the time. But for some of these vendors, for some of the retailers, it was going to be a little bit pricey. We really wanted to start a conversation. So what we did was, I'd like to receive more information, and then they could send us back, and it came with an envelope. The envelope actually had for this one, the Northeast affiliate, it had any HPBA at the top. It had any HPBA's return address. So everything was very, very tailored and very, very customized so that it looked like it came from the local group. But even though it was supported by, you've got the main HPBA logo on here as well. So before we jump into key takeaways with like 2 minutes left, and Kyle, I don't know if you usually cut these things right at an hour. I can stay on for 2 minutes longer. But does anybody have any questions about what I just went over with the brochures and those things?
Scott, so yeah, we can definitely go a couple minutes over. If people got to jump once we go over key takeaways, how about you do that? And then as questions are coming in, if people want to stick around, we can get those answered for them.
All right, cool. Key takeaways, I hope that I have gotten to these pretty much throughout, so these are not going to be surprises for you. But key takeaways, one of the things that we did not do real well because of the multiple steps and the multiple personalities and affiliates was to measure. It was very difficult, and so I would have really liked to have come out of this with saying, hey, we passed out, we could do some of this, but we passed out this many brochures, we made this many visits, we had this many phone calls, and then we ultimately ended up with this many members. Because a lot of that went into the hands of the affiliates and never came back to national, we did not do a great job of that, and so we didn't get a lot of great data. All I heard and found from the client was that everybody was very happy with the way it went. Their retailer members did go up. And so that is great, right? But it again would have been nice if you do it again to say, well, last time we did it, we got 10 members. This time we got 20 members or whatever it might be. So one of the key things as you're setting up a program like this, definitely figure out a way to measure. We tried, but it just did not work. And then they got national, ended up talking with the affiliates and trying to beat the information out of the affiliates, and it just didn't come. So one of the keys is measure. 2, support from a national perspective. Again, my #1 goal was to help the affiliates, was to get some activity out of them, to get some action out of them, but make this as painless as possible and give them the resources that they needed to be able to do what they needed to do. So make sure you're providing them always with the support they need so that they can be successful. And then finally, as you saw from that last piece that we just went over, customize your outreach to maximize your impact. I think this is pretty much true with all marketing and membership work that you're doing right now, but nobody wants to see just a generic piece that's talking to everybody about everything that you need to sort through on your own. Take your time to find out which pieces, which bullets, which whatever are appropriate for you. You need to segment as much as you can, and I think that we did a really, really great job of that during this campaign. And so that's all.
Awesome. Well, since we're right at 1 o'clock, I'll do this. Everyone, thank you so much for coming. We're going to continue to bring in resources like this. Scott and I will stick around if you got some questions. I got a couple that I'll throw Scott's way right now. But I want to make sure we're respectful of everyone's time. So really great to see everyone out. If you do have any issues or challenges, or this is a really big strategic objective for you all this year to grow membership through the components, or you recognize that as a huge opportunity, please let us know. We have an entire knowledge bank built out of resources, and obviously Scott would be happy to engage in those conversations as well. So you know how to reach us.
Kyle, I want you to interrupt you really, really quick. If anybody has any other questions that they have to hop off the webinar, feel free to email me, call me. I'm on Twitter. You can find me any way you want. Go to my website. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Awesome. And we'll send out the presentation in Scott's website as well. Scott, one question I had on the measure. So I'm thinking too, and Matt said great presentation. Thank you. Good to see you, Matt. If Scott, like on the measure, I'm wondering, and if people are sticking around, feel free to answer this. How many can accept coupon codes through their, either component checkout pages or national? Because one way I was thinking was, would this be plausible to offer some kind of coupon code for this actual campaign to get a better sense of who came in and not, or is it something that would be hard logistically?
It would actually, if your affiliates have the ability to do that, that to me is the way to go. That's how you're going to track it. It would make it much, much easier. I mean, you could make it as simple as, when you're going to join, type in any HPBA, right? And that makes it simple, because in this case, they had all those acronyms already. They wouldn't have to make up some crazy thing, AZ2Y1ZX, whatever. They could just do it. The challenge was that some of our affiliates did not have the greatest technology background, and so it would have been very, very hard for them to track that.
Gotcha. And so especially the ones that are volunteer ran, we see it comes up a lot with this technology issue. Is it possible, or, you know, could you have, I don't even know if you could have created a checkout form for them or something like that, but if not, are there any other ways that you could lend some advice on how they could have tracked it, or from what you guys learned without the coupon code?
I mean, the only way to do it, what we tried to do was we tried to get them to collect any inquiries they had and to let us know on a monthly basis, or actually we tried every 2 weeks, but then it ended up being on a monthly basis. We tried to get them to give us on a monthly basis how many inquiries they received, because those, like I said, all of those little slips that were at the bottom of the direct mail piece, they all went right back to the affiliate. And so what we tried to do was get them to track it, and they're going to follow up. I believe that HPBA actually did this, but I don't know what kind of information they actually received because I had stopped working with them at the time. They tried to get numbers on how many people actually converted. That was the key, because we had two sort of metrics there. You had one, how many people raised their hand and expressed interest in finding out more information. Then you had two, how many people actually joined.
Yeah, because part of the challenge that we see with a lot of the associations that we talk to or come to these webinars is, you know, we talk about the cost that goes into this, and people at HQ will ask, is it worth it? And the answer is we don't know until we can see what it made. So it might be a perceived high cost to get it done, but the ROI that it could create is tremendous, right? So that question is it's super relative to what you're making on it. So that's really interesting. I would love to hear from anybody in the audience or listening to the recording that we send out. If you've done something really successful and were able to measure it, how did you do that? Because I think that's a really good obstacle to kind of unpack to learn from.
That is a huge piece to this. I think that as many good things that this association has many good things, as many things this association had going for them in their relationship with the affiliates, when it came to technology and it came to that sort of communication, they weren't all on the same platform. They weren't doing everything the same. So those were the challenges, right? But there were so many good things that they did. But at that time, they were just not all on the same platform, using the same AMS, using the same whatever. Because if you had that, then National could just go in and figure out how many people there were, right? You know, you put a campaign code in there or whatever it might be, and National controlled that information, but they weren't all tied together at the time. I'm seeing more and more and more associations that are working off of the same AMS or the same system in some ways, and that makes it a lot easier.
Awesome. Well, Scott, we really appreciate you, man. Love what you're doing. I'm excited to share more of what you got going on with the community that we got building here for CRPs. So thanks a lot for joining us today, man.
My pleasure. Thank you, and thanks everybody for staying on.
Awesome. Everybody have an incredible rest of your week. Remember, next week we have the roundtables in the DC area. So Tuesday we're in DC, Wednesday we're in Alexandria, and Thursday we're in Reston. Come out and meet the rest of the community. Join us for lunch. We'll buy you lunch, and it's been a really great time. So if you need those links, let us know. The presentation here and the recording will be sent out to you once we get it all cleaned up. Until next time, though, keep on making change. Keep on doing what you're doing. It's great to see the community building here, helping each other grow their associations and make a greater impact through their components. Thanks a lot, everybody. We'll talk to you soon.
Take care.